Resident Evil 4's inventory is one of the most beloved elements in gaming. It consistently gets unanimous praise for its complex management. Sorting different sized items in the most optimal way seems to have resonated with a lot of players. And I admit it's an interesting idea and can be quite novel at first. However, it overstays its welcome very quickly. I want to make a case that argues that the RE4 inventory is not only incredibly flawed, but is an active detriment to the game. Firstly, we must tackle the supposed deep sorting and management that it brings. It is true that you will need to fiddle around to fit all the items you want, if you even can. In this way, it's supposed to be an improvement on the single tile system of classic RE. There is now an entire new layer of size added on top of things. You no longer have to just consider whether you should bring a herb, you now also have to concern yourself with the size of the herb in relation to, say, the pistol. Every single frame of a game has a correct choice in relation to a goal, and here it's no different. Every single item combination will have the correct inventory sorting, one that leaves you with the least objects you have to leave behind. So if we assume that the player will find the right answer on every single screen, it functionally does not end up being much different than the tile system of one. In fact, this new size-based sorting gives you way more room to work with than before, so it's not like it introduces more scarcity either. Now you might wonder, why are we so quick to assume that the player will find the right combination? Well, that is because, like in 1's inventory, 4 is a pause screen. You can sit on it indefinitely, for as long as you like. It's safe to say that this is the most defining aspect of it, the fact that it freezes time. The Tetris comparisons are simply surface level and inaccurate. Tetris does not wait for you to find the best place to drop the blocks. They simply fall, and it's up to you to find the best possible spot before it hits the ground. Tetris also does not show you all the blocks that will come. You are working with limited information. Resident Evil 4 instead has all the items on the screen, and has all the time in the world. The correct choice is no longer a matter of skill in relation to time pressure. It's a matter of trial and error until you either hit the optimal fit, or give up and do something subpar. Depth is the contradiction between complexity and a counterforce. There is no counterforce in Resident Evil 4's inventory, so its management ends up being only as deep as Resident Evil 1's. Do I take the green herb or do I keep the bullets? Only now, to reach that identical decision, you have to go through an entire layer of manual labor that anybody can solve with enough time on the clock. That is devoid of interesting decision making. The other, bigger flaw of the inventory was teased earlier. It's a pause screen. This means that every time you pull out a grenade, you have to pause. Every time you want to heal, you have to pause. Every time you switch weapons, you pause. Not only does it completely break up the flow and significantly reduce the tension of the game, it also enables you to heal with zero downside or risk as long as you have a healing item. The thing is, it's a sort of self-defeating system. RE4 is an action third-person shooter, where it comes many new systems like aiming, more active positioning, crowd control, etc. All these extra skill-based failure points require items to create a bigger margin. More items comes with more lengthy manual labor in the form of sorting, and it introduces more pausing. The more you pause and the longer you do so, the worse the action pacing becomes. On top of that, the game is resource-based, so you're actively rewarded for switching to the best possible tools at hand, which, you guessed it, introduces more pausing. The more you play, the more you notice it. It creates this dissonance between a combat system that tries to be tense and high-octane, with constant braking to have you play a warehouse worker in a storeroom with no tension. If only there was a better alternative in the same series. Resident Evil 5 is a clear gameplay improvement over 4 in every way, and the inventory system is no different. The size-based sorting is gone. In its place, we have returned to the single tile system from 1, and the maximum limit of slots is capped at 9. Your pistol, once again, takes up the same space as your healing spray. At first this might seem like a step back from 4, a decrease in sheer complexity. But as we know, complexity by itself has no inherent value. In fact, 4 actively suffers from that bonus complexity. The core of 4 and 5 is third-person shooting, the aiming, the movement, the positioning, etc. Layers like resource management and inventory are only there to wrap around the core, to create more ambiguous situations the player needs to solve. By cutting down the inventory size, RE5 cuts down on any excess that distracts from the action. Unlike 4, 5 more accurately knows what it is. 5 understands what experience it wants to deliver, and correctly knows that warehouse labor is a detraction to third-person shooting, rather than an enhancement. This systematic slimming down also comes with other benefits. Despite not being very interested in survival horror, 5 has a way more oppressive sense of scarcity, on top of fixing one of the big balance problems 4 had. The fact that healing was treated as less valuable than weapons in terms of size. Healing is a buffer that allows you to rewind mistakes. It might not actually help you advance the game like a shotgun would, but being able to fix mistakes with little downside is actually more powerful. 5 correctly treats it as just as valuable as every other resource, and also abandons resource abundance. Thanks to the 9-slot layout, the game also layers the Dpad quick select over the inventory seamlessly. The middle of each direction matches up with the respective Dpad direction. It's a very small thing, but for the first time in the series, where you place an item has an effect on the real-time action. If none of this has you convinced just yet, no worries, I have not dropped the biggest nuke yet. The inventory is now entirely real-time. No, not a pause screen, not a slowdown or anything similar, it's full real-time. This means that there is now no distinction between inventory screen and gameplay, they're one and the same. Every second selecting, moving or combining an item is now a second that has passed in gameplay. This change has a million implications on the design, big and small, but at its core it allows all of the actions that previously were completely free, only bound by your patience, to now have a real cost. Let's take healing for example. In Resident Evil 4, to heal you open your inventory, freezing all time, and use a healing item that immediately refills your bar. It doesn't matter where you open the inventory, it could have been 1 second before a grab, or 5 miles away from any enemy. As long as you press that pause button and have a healing item, you will be healed. In contrast, in 5 you open your inventory, move your cursor to a recovery item and use it, prompting an entire healing animation. During this entire sequence the game was proceeding. This means that while doing that action that was previously so simple, the enemies could have surrounded you, a grab or an attack could have reached you, and even if nothing of the sort happened, the time still passed. Things moved, factors shuffled, context changed. This is felt in the campaign, but is at its strongest in Mercenaries, where seconds are just as valuable as health. In Mercs, time is a constantly draining meta resource. Every action you decide to take now has an inherent cost attached to it. You need to constantly figure out the fastest way to do everything in order to keep up. And because inventory is now real time, it's also subject to the seconds economy. Just the act of stopping in place, popping open your trunk and sorting things now costs you. Because of this new influence over the inventory, the player has to figure out strategies to survive, ways to optimize, which leads to one of my favorite mechanics in 5 and maybe all of gaming, messing around in your case during animations. Every canned non-interactive sequence, whether it be you kicking an enemy or jumping over a window, is now an opportunity to sort, combine or reload, and in the process completely negating the time cost of all of these actions. RE4 and 5 are all about these high commitment animations. But 5's Mercenaries mode is the first time the player's skill is tested during those non-interactive animations. An amazing example of a system layered on top of a core, complicating and making it more interesting without subverting or pulling away from it. A second ago I mentioned reloading, and this is one of the ways 5 actually loosens restrictions. You can reload every weapon in the game by dragging and combining its respective ammo. I would usually be opposed to such a change, since thanks to it, skilled players basically never have to interact with the reload animation. But considering a massive amounts of depth gained, I consider this an okay trade-off. Like all great action systems, this new inventory carries with it a contradiction, one that the player must constantly grapple with. The inventory is inherently dynamic. As you use, discard, combine or pick up items, the actual contents of those 9 slots change. Whether it be moving and making sure your ammo is close to its weapon, discarding to make space for a herb, or making sure the grenade you scooped up is on the correct Dpad, you're constantly making changes and readjusting your inventory in real time while fighting enemies. Using and gaining items influences your inventory and its state, and your inventory in turn feeds back into the play. Like all good action games, RE5 blends its systems to the point where it's really hard to distinguish where one starts and where one ends. It's not a little side sorting minigame that tests your patience for chores. It's an actual real gameplay system with real stakes and consequences. In fact, I'm gonna go a bit further. 5 is the first Resident Evil game in the series that makes how you sort, navigate and interact with your inventory actually matter. I know I sound incredibly critical of Resident Evil 4 in this video, however, it's for a good cause. It's to show how important Resident Evil 5 is as a game. It's so rare that we get an amazing sequel that genuinely builds on its predecessors. But it's key not to lose sight of what a strong foundation 4 sets. Probably one of the defining traits of Shinji Mikami and why he's one of the best designers ever is the fact that he leaves behind good games that, more importantly, act as rock-solid foundations. Clear vision, clear rules, genuine creativity, and a freedom through player restriction. Resident Evil 1, 4, God Hand, these are all good games in their own right, but they also make for amazing bases to build on. There was nothing like 4 before 4 happened. Mikami and his team did that from the ground up, so they are awarded a certain level of grace. Earlier I mentioned that RE5 is a direct improvement over 4 in every gameplay way, and I truly stand by that, but it's important to acknowledge that to reach for the sun, it's standing on the shoulders of a giant.
しろって言われたら懺悔いくらでもするんですけど、本当に好き放題したかった一回、で売れる売れないではなく